Hello, hello. It's Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. And today we are going to be listening to some tunes together. I'll bring up the frequency analyzer. I'll bring up the Spotify share, and we will listen to a pretty big record. This is a record that has been out for, oh my goodness, about 25 years now, but it has about 1.1 billion streams on the Spotify. And that's not counting how many streams there are on YouTube and everywhere else. This is a big song. And one of the reasons I wanted to go into this song is because it's a song that's come up a whole bunch of times recently as a reference, whether for mastering clients, whether for people in the mixed feedback sessions, my one-on-one coaching call clients. This has come up, I feel like, at least 3 times in the past month. So I'm like, this is the universe trying to tell me something. We've got to go under the hood of this song. It is from a band that historically I'm not a huge fan of. This is a song by Blink-182, came out in 1999. In 1999, I'll date myself, I was 17 years old, and I was into stuff much cooler and more underground than Blink-182, man. So I didn't get into this record. It was too pop for me. It came under the auspices of pop punk. And I would say that, you know, to be fair of critics, Blink-182 are more a pop band with like a punky-ish aesthetic than a punk band, in my opinion. Maybe that's me being overly critical, but it's not me being overly critical because now listening to it in my ripe old age of 42, I'm hearing things in this that makes me go, wow, I understand why this is so popular. They are doing so many things right from a pop perspective. If you want to make music that gets heard by millions, billions of people, they are doing absolutely everything right in this production. In the mix, that's part of it, but also in the arrangement, because a huge part of getting good mixes is getting great arranging. And a good part of getting great arranging is good songwriting. And whether or not you like their style, there is a sense in which the songwriting here is good, at the very least, from a structural perspective. Even if you're not a fan of the lyrics or you think it's not complex enough, but there is actually some significant complexity in here. But the complexity doesn't come from having 100 different chords and, unexpected note choices. The complexity instead comes from the song structure and the arrangement. There's so much that happens in this song within just 30 seconds. And if you're just going to dismiss them, you're not going to hear it. And I would say that one of the things that's exemplified here in this track, All the Small Things by Blink-182, streamed 1.1 billion times on Spotify, it's that what they get right is all the small things. And this is what it takes to make addictive mixes. Mixes that you have trouble turning off, that have forward momentum to them, that makes listeners stay tuned in. And there are so many tricks inside this as a song, as an arrangement, and as a mix. And we'll also look at why so many people are bringing this to me, even to this day, 25 years later, as a sonic reference for drums that sound good and guitars that sound good. And we'll look at what tricks they're doing in the mix to accomplish all of that. Those of you who are impatient and don't like me talking probably want me to just hit play, and we will do that in a second. The only thing I've got to do before we get into it is give the briefest of shout outs to our sponsors, and then we'll go through the listening and analysis together. Quick shout out and thanks to our most important sponsor on this podcast, who, as always, is you. How do you sponsor this podcast? Check out one of our great full-length courses like Mixing Breakthroughs, Mastering, Demystified, Compression Breakthroughs, EQ Breakthroughs. All these courses are guaranteed to change the way you work forever for the better, or your money back. It's an absolutely great way to sponsor the podcast, but also sponsor yourself. You will change the way that you mix forever for the better, guaranteed. You can also sponsor me if you don't want to pay a dime with your likes on the YouTubes or with your 5-star ratings and reviews on the podcast. I really am trying to grow the audio-only version of the podcast too, so I'd appreciate any reviews that you can give. It absolutely helps spread the word on the podcast. Big shout out and thanks, as always, to Soundtoys sponsoring this podcast from the beginning, making some of my favorite creative mixing effects in the known universe. Try out anything they make for free for 30 days over at soundtoys.com. All right, without any further ado, let's get right into it. And I'm also thinking in the future of doing like some sessions where we like take reviews. You guys could put super chats in there. I'm sorry, take requests where you guys can put super chats in there, like request a song to have a mix analysis done, and we'll just do it in real time. That could be a lot of fun. People have been asking me to do more and more of these mix analyses, because one of the greatest ways to hear what's going on in your mix is to really hear what's going on in the mixes of others. With all my yakking out of the way, let's go ahead into my screen share mode. I'll start playing the song, and as we go along, I'll bring up the frequency analyzer so we can see a few things about it. Here we go. All the Small Things by Blink-182. Listen to what's going on just in the first 30 to 40 seconds alone. Here we go. Now, we're 42 seconds in, and so many things have happened in this song. And if you're just letting it wash over you, which is what you can do when you're listening to pop music and just kind of tuning out the how do you say this word? Why can I not say intricate right now? Intricacies. Oh my goodness. If you're tuning out the intricacies of what's going on and letting it wash over you, there's so much that you could miss. But I want to force you to hear what's going on in this song, because this is what's giving it the forward propulsion, all these intricacies. Should I say the small things that are in the song? All right, let's break this down, literally a few seconds at a time. I'm going to play the first 8 seconds, and one of the big things that's going to happen be right there in the first 8 seconds. Five seconds in, we get what I would consider a pattern interrupt. There are two types of shifts that you can give someone in a pop song. There are pattern interrupts and scene changes. A pattern interrupt is you've established a musical pattern and then you subvert the musical pattern that you've created. And this is such a cheap trick, but these cheap tricks are used again and again and again because they work. One of the cheap tricks of music production, start with telephony stuff and then make things big. And then things will sound really, really big because it was sound telephony a second ago. Another one of these tricks that is used again and again because it works is pattern interrupt. We're establishing a certain tonality, a certain rhythm, and then we interrupt both that tonality and that rhythm with palm muted guitar. So we go from melodic sounding chordal guitar strums into palm muted percussive guitar. This is a pattern interrupt that happens twice in the first 10 seconds of the song. Listen for that pattern interrupt twice. And you get one pattern interrupt within the first 5 seconds and another pattern interrupt within the next 5 seconds. Are you programming this kind of stuff into your arrangements, into your songwriting, and into your mixes? Let's listen to these first 10 seconds, and then we'll find the next scene change that happens. And now we have scene change. So 14 seconds in, 3 things have happened in this song. We've had pattern interrupt, repeat of pattern interrupt, and then scene change. Scene change is now the guitar chord texture has completely changed. What the guitars are doing change and vocals come in. That's a scene change. We've moved from one section of a song to another, and it's clear, and it's happened within the first 14 seconds. Now, I bring this up, it seems kind of obvious, but I bring this up because so many people who are new to music production, new to mixing, new to songwriting, don't do these very simple things that keep listeners' attention. The most recent person to bring this up as a reference for me was on our members-only mix feedback session on Thursday. And we listened to the first 40 seconds of the song, and I'm like, dude, like 6 things have happened. And then we listened to his track that he was working on, on the newer end of things. And literally for 40 seconds, nothing happened in his song. There were no changes. There were no pattern interrupts. There were no scene changes. There were no new instruments. It was just we've established the riff of the song and we're kind of feeling our way through it and trying to establish it for 30 seconds. This does not do that. We've had 3 major things happen in the first 15 seconds. Let's keep on going because that's not it. I'll back it up. Here we are going into the first scene change at 15 seconds and listen to what happens in the scene change to guitars and new instrument being introduced.
Small
So here we are, 30 seconds, and now we have our next, what I would call a scene change. And this is a subtle scene change. This scene change is we have a quick pattern interrupt and then scene change. So right around 25 seconds, for the first time, we're introduced to a new idea, tom fills. Tom fills are part of this song. And there is a tasteful but busy tom fill right at the end of a rhythmic section. And then when our next rhythmic section begins, our next set of bars begins, we are confronted with a textural change in the vocal. What is the textural change in the vocal? Well, a vocal double comes in, but it's not just a vocal double. It's a vocal double with reverb on it. These are the arrangement things. I'll get to the mix things in a second because there are important mix decisions made on each one of these things in this first 30 seconds that we have to consider. Why do the guitars sound good? Why do the drums sound good? Why do the vocals sound good? Why are people using this as a reference? And we'll talk about the balance choices and the tonal choices made in just a second. But now that I've tuned you into this, I want you on your side to count pattern interrupts and scene changes. I count pattern interrupt of palm muted guitar. That happens about 5 seconds in, happens again about 10 seconds in. And then around 14 seconds in, we have our first scene change where the guitar pattern changes, the drum pattern and drum texture changes. The drums move to playing a pattern off of the hi-hats and a less busy pattern that now is out of the way of the vocal. And the vocal comes in. All of that happens at 14 seconds. And then we keep on going and we get to go a little bit longer. Why do we get to go longer now without a pattern interrupt or a scene change? It's because the vocal is there and the vocalist is telling us a story. As soon as the vocal is there, we don't have to play as many of these tricks as often. We can have now almost 15 seconds of just listening to the vocal narrative. But that's not enough because halfway through, after about 15 seconds of vocal narrative, less actually, about 10 seconds, we get a pattern interrupt in drum fill, and then we get a scene change in a vocal being added. Try to count all of those things along with me in the first 30 seconds. And that's not even counting what happens at 40 seconds. Let's keep going. And now big scene change again at 40 seconds. So 40 seconds in, how many fingers did I hold up there? I lost count. Were there like 8 things that happened? Maybe it was 9 with that. Go back and tell me in the comments or the chat how many fingers I was holding up right before it changed. I forget if it was 7 or 8. There was like 7 or 8 or 9 things that happened in 40 seconds. This is something happening roughly every 5 seconds, maybe every 10 seconds. And are your songs, are your productions, are your arrangements doing this? Now, before we get into this whole next section, which whole new scene change here at 42 seconds is the biggest scene change yet. Our whole drum pattern changes, musically everything changes, and we'll get into that in a second. But I just want to evaluate why this grabs people from a reference perspective, saying, I love these guitars, I love these drums, how do they do it? Let's analyze that section by section. We'll take the first section before the vocals drop and think for yourself, what are the mix balances here? Like, what are the relationships? I have this theory of there being 3 tiers in mixing. You've got your A tier instruments, your B tier instruments, and your C tier instruments. Your A tier are your main characters. There's only 1 or 2 of these things. Your B tier are your supporting characters. There's only 1 or 2 of these things. And then there's your C tier, which in that section is everything else. And I want you to categorize for yourself what's A tier and what's B tier right here in this first section, first 15 seconds of the song. And that will yield insights into why things sound the way they do. Here we go, first 15 seconds. It's like our A and B tier is guitar and snare. Or you could say our A tier is guitar and snare, and like everything else in the kit is in our B tier, kit and bass is in B tier. You could say it that way. Or you could say like guitar is A, snare is B, and then like everything else in the whole mix is C tier. Cymbals are actually a little bit behind snare in this one, but the cymbals are relatively loud. But our guitars are allowed to be so loud, especially on those palm muted parts, the parts where we hear the guitar more rhythmically instead of chordally or melodically. Those are really allowed to leap out a little bit more. I wouldn't be surprised if the mixer, in this case it's Tom Lord-Alge, is maybe even doing a little bit of automation up on those palm muted bits to make them pop, because they really do. Now, let's keep on going. And in our first scene change, what is our main focus?
All the small things, true care, truth brings. I'll take one lift, you're right, best trip, always.
So for me, it's arguable here in this section. It's still like guitars are probably the A tier element. And one of the big things here is that they are hard panned. I mean, we have really wide sounding guitars, and then there's a big hole in the middle for everything else. Now, after this A tier element of guitars, what's right after it? Is it vocals? Is it snare drum? Is both vocals and snare drum kind of B tier together? And we could have arguments about like what's the highest. It depends on like how loud you're listening to the mix, what kind of system you're listening to the mix on. These things can change. Your own just subjective preferences can change what seems to fit into what tier. So there's some argument, but we know that there's three things here that are in the A and B tiers. They are wide pan guitars, probably taking the lead, and then either snare or vocal. But then right after that, we get our vocal double come in, and that rockets the vocal up into A tier. And one of the things that this does is we're not starting this off like a pop song where the vocal comes in and the vocal is the loudest thing and it's the main character. No, for the first 30 seconds of this song, we're establishing that things like guitars and snare drums are the main characters. This is mixed like a rock record. It's not mixed like a pop record. The vocals, they can take a backseat to guitars and maybe snare drum. And that's how rock records are mixed. But then halfway through this verse, it's like, okay, let's change to pop record mode. We're going to like almost double the level of the vocals, and they are going to be the A tier thing. So it really blends between the rock aesthetic and the pop aesthetic in mixing. Let's listen to that change one more time and think about what is leading the relationship for you. And when we get to this 30-second mark, listen to just how the perspective of how loud the vocals are in the mix, what tier they're in, absolutely changes when that double comes in. And that's not how you have to use doubles. There's a lot of records in which doubles come in and they're faint and they're quieter than the main vocal. No, when this double comes in, it's louder than the main vocal and it has more reverb on it. So we have loud guitars, loud snare, and, modestly loud vocal that's really dry. And then we have even louder, wetter vocal coming on top of it, lifting the vocal up. Rather than just supporting the vocal or adding texture to it, it literally lifts the vocal up. Listen for that change one more time.
True care, truth brings. I'll take one lift, you're right, best trip, always. I know you'll be at my show, watching, waiting, commiserating. Say it ain't so, I will not go, turn the lights off, carry me home.
And another scene change. We get one section that lasts from like 41 seconds to 46 seconds, another like 5-second snippet of a big scene change, and then we go right into another scene change of 47 seconds. Man, have like 10 major things happen in the first 47 seconds of the song. This is how you make addictive mixes. And you don't necessarily have to listen to a mix like this. Like if you're listening to music as an enjoyer, there's no, 15-year-old girl who loves this song who is listening to it the way we're listening to it right now. There's no, soccer mom who grew up on pop punk who's listening to the song, who's analyzing in this way. There's no dude who really likes the guitar and drum sounds on this record and grew up loving pop punk stuff that is necessarily listening to in this way. They're letting it wash over them. They're getting the, emotional impact of the song. They're getting, driven and pulled along by it. They don't know why. But if you want to create those experiences for other people, you have to know why. And that's the big thing. Now, this is if you want to make records that are heard by millions, and in this case, billions of people. That doesn't have to be the goal. For instance, right now with this live stream, I am not doing any of that. I could do the YouTuber approach, right? Of having an edit in here every 7 seconds. Because what we're talking about here in music production doesn't only apply to music production. It applies to movies and TV and, yes, YouTube videos. You can absolutely take this approach in YouTube videos. And if I wanted to make YouTube videos that would be seen by millions or billions of people, which is done, I would probably have edits in here every 4 to 7 seconds. That's not what I'm trying to do. And musically, it might not be what you're trying to do either. With that said, there are still lessons you can learn from this stuff. If you find yourself writing sections to songs and nothing changes for 30 to 40 seconds, consider it. Consider whether you're doing that for a good reason or because you're being self-indulgent or lazy or prideful. Because some of us get prideful about our art. I mean, I get prideful about, how I do YouTube videos. I'm like, I'm good enough. I can just come on here and talk, I don't have to do all those tricks because I'm good at talking, even though I can't pronounce the word intricacies, apparently. That's prideful. And I have to shut myself up sometimes and be like, you know what? Those people who complain that in my videos, all I do is talk and they're too long and get to the point already. On the one hand, they're not my target audience. But on the other hand, they're not totally wrong either. And do people like that reel me back in from going too far excessively where I'd have no audience because I don't care about the end experience for the end listener? So that's something I'm thinking about when I'm doing a YouTube video. It's the kind of thing I'd be thinking about too in mixing. They're the kinds of things you should think about in song arranging and songwriting and in mixes and in production. And the great things that Tom Lord-Alge is doing here as a mixer, because our perspective here is focusing on the mix and not just the production and the songwriting, he is acknowledging what those beautiful pattern interrupts and scene changes are, and he's figuring out how to enhance them and what things to prioritize in each. Now it's a great mix in that you can hear the bass, right? Like if you want to listen for the bass line, you can hear the bass line, and that's great. But the bass line is not the forward, front, and center thing. It's something you can go looking for and is there. The kick drum is not like hitting you in the chest, this big thing. People talk about how great the drum sound is on these records, but it's not the kick drum they're listening to. Tom Lord-Alge knows what makes this unique. What should we focus on? Well, good sounding backbeat, interesting sounding snare drum. And then is Travis Barker, is that the name of the drummer for Blink-182? I think that's right, unless I'm getting it mixed up. Travis Barker, his tom fills. And letting those highly tuned tom fills come forward and be a main character. Let's listen to the tom fills again happening in this pattern interrupt section, how he's allowing them to be prominent, kind of B tier. They're not detracting from the vocal. And when we get into our pattern interrupt here around 40 seconds, what happens is the guitars, we're really ringing out one chord, and that creates our tonal palette. And then we have vocals and toms being kind of the featured element. So we have really big guitar intro, but that guitar just rings. And then we're allowing to focus primarily on vocal, but the toms pushing things along. And one of the reasons the toms can be so featured is because the guitars are allowed to take a back seat in this section. This is another big concept, taking turns. In mixing, taking turns is so important. Do you want to have big toms in your mix, big guitars, big vocals, and a big kick drum, and a big snare drum, and a big bass? You can do that. You just can't do them all at the same time. But if you have them take turns, you have the guitars and the toms take turns, they can both seem featured and huge. And you remember the guitars being big because when the guitars were a focal point, they were allowed to be huge. But when the toms should be big, we're allowing the guitars in the arrangement, and ideally in the mix as well, we're allowing the guitars to take a back seat. So now the toms can take their turn. And you'll say, how does he get big toms and big guitars at the same time? It's because he doesn't get them at the same time. Let's check out that transition one more time at 41 seconds, then we'll keep on going.
Watching, waiting, commiserating. Say it ain't so, I will not go. Turn the lights off, carry me home.
Another pattern interrupt and scene change right there. But this na 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 section is almost one of the only two moments that we've been able to like breathe without anything changing for 10 seconds. And it plays a relatively like surprisingly meditative role in this track because it's the first time we haven't been given a new piece of candy in 4 or 5 seconds. It's like, no, suck on this piece of candy, man, for a whole 10 seconds of na na na. And you can suck on for 10 seconds because one, there's vocals, and two, you've never heard this section before. And then, of course, they immediately pattern interrupt again, preceding it with cool drum fills into next section. Let's hear this transition one more time. Listen for the things that we've been talking about.
Say it ain't so, I will not go. Turn the lights off, carry me home.
I have to say it. The bass is there in that section. Is it as prominent as toms and vocals? No. Big guitar, prominent vocals and toms. The bass is there if you're looking for it. And then let's keep going.
Say it ain't so, I will not go. Turn the lights off, carry me home.
So, I mean, so many things have happened in a minute. And now we finally come around to the verse. And there's more that we can explore in both mixing and arranging. I mean, now when the verse comes in, we have to amp up the tension a little bit. So what happens this time? We don't have the vocal by itself for the whole first section of the first verse. Instead, we have almost a call and response where it's bare vocal and then our doubled vocal with the additional reverb on top of the double vocal that makes it louder. So we're going from naked to doubled to now naked, doubled, naked, doubled. And what happens on the back half of this verse? Let's listen to this transition one more time.
Late night, come home, work sucks, I know. She left me roses by the stairs. Surprises let me know she cares. Say it ain't so.
And now we're back around to this section again. But if we listen to the whole rest of the song, which I'm not going to do, I don't like to play more than 90 seconds of these songs in these things for copyright reasons. I want you to go listen to it and get on the streaming services and all that. And I want you to do more of this analysis for yourself. If you enjoyed listening to this particular song, even if you haven't been a Blink-182 fan in the past, which I have to admit, I haven't been in the past, I want to give you the assignment. If you learn something from this, listen to the remaining 90 seconds and ask yourself, how do they continue to make it interesting? How is the second verse different from the first verse? How is the second chorus different than the first chorus? If you're into songwriting, one of the most important things you can do is like write down the song structure. You can do it in a conventional way where you write down A section, B section, C section. Each of those is new. Oh, we're back to what seems like the A section, so let's write that down. Oh, we've actually gone to the B section, but there's something different about the B section where there's different instrumentation, so let's call that like B prime. You could write it down that way if you want to. If you're into songwriting, do that kind of thing. Song structure. Man, actually having like a good skeleton to a song, that is so huge for songwriting and arrangement. And then listen for the things from an arrangement perspective. What instruments are coming in and coming out? If you take notes on this stuff, you're going to become a killer songwriter and arranger. But how many people right now who think that they're into music production, who think that they're into songwriting, who think that they're into producing, don't do this. Don't sit down and actually with like pen and paper, or you can do it digitally if you want to, write down the song structure of a song that you think is a great production. Write down the instrumentation that you can hear in each section and how the instrumentation changes. This is better for you than getting a multi-track. People are always looking for multi-tracks to work off of, and that's great. Get multi-tracks. Learn to mix off of multi-tracks. Awesome. But this requires you to listen critically, to actually hear music, and it will teach you how to listen to your own music. These are some of the kinds of things that you should be taking out of references, and why I always stress it, and why I think one of the key ingredients that's one of the most underreported ingredients in mixing great, recording great, producing great, writing great, is listening to records you love. And not even just listening to records you love. Listening to records that you hate but are jealous of. Like, that's a great place to learn. Sometimes it's like too hard to listen to music that you love and learn from it. And sometimes you don't want to wear your influences just on your sleeve. Sometimes it's better to go to a song that you respect in a style that you hate, because you can have enough interest and emotional reaction to that particular song. Like, hey, this song is kind of good, but you know that you're not going to exactly impersonate that song. So you don't have to worry about wearing your influences on your sleeve too much. If you go to music that you're not 100% in love with, but you like that one song and you think there's good things about the production, those are some excellent things to learn from. Sometimes even more fruitful than learning from your favorite records that you really deeply emotionally identify with. That said, you should probably also do this to some records that you really deeply, emotionally connect with. And don't think that you can't turn this off, because you can. It is true that once you learn about like audio mixing, all of a sudden for a little while, you're the guy who like points out in every movie that you watch, like you're watching with your girlfriend, your significant other or whatever, and you're like, oh, I can't believe that Foley is out of sync over there, or they really messed up that dialogue mix. Or you learn about video production, you notice things about the cuts they're doing, and the color correction is off, you'll notice, or something. I'm really bad at noticing when color correction is off. I really don't care. You will become that guy for a short period of time as you analyze this stuff. But once the analysis becomes so second nature, you really can turn it on and off, and you really can just listen to music like a normal person. I don't listen to music this way all the time. If this song were to just come on, I wouldn't be wearing this hat. But if it's time to work, if it's time to make things that are going to allow other people to turn their analytical side off, to allow other people to go on a roller coaster ride of emotion, to allow other people to feel pulled forward by a song, then you need to at least occasionally do this kind of analysis. I hope this one was useful for you. Nothing's here says, you should do a stream for fans to give you songs to react to and talk about the mixing. I actually do that in our members mix feedback sessions. I'd encourage you, if you really like the stream, if you've gotten this far, it's silly that you're not a member of this channel yet. For $5 a month, you become a member of this channel and you get exclusive access to a whole bunch of videos that other people don't have access to, but also our members-only live streams. I do Q&A live streams, but I also do mix feedback live streams. And you can watch them later if you can't make it in time. You can give me your mix in advance. But what I ask people for is not just their mix, but their mix and 2 or 3 songs that they love the sound of as general references. And I don't start by listening to the records. I start by listening to their favorite records. Hey, let's hear just, the first 30 seconds of a couple records you love. And I will analyze just out loud. Ooh, what are some of the things going on here? This is the things that I notice about this mix, that I notice about this production. Now let's hear what you're doing. Then we hear what you're doing. And some of you in the members only section are like so amazing at this, like you have quality output that is like on par with amazing commercial releases. We have great people in the members only section. But some of you people are like, what's the gap? I don't understand. I'm doing all the things that all the blogs and the Instagram reels and the YouTube shorts and the mix with the masters videos tell me to do, and my mix doesn't sound like theirs. I can tell you, like, here are the differences. Here's what's different between records you love the sound of and yours. It often comes down to things like level balances between different instruments. It often comes down to things like use of effects. And how you're using effects will often be very different than records you actually love, and I can articulate that specific stuff for you. Also, frequency loading, like frequency balance in particular instruments. We can talk about how that's different. And there's some common themes that come up a lot. But those common themes are different across genres. Like the advice that I give to someone who's listening to EDM records or hip-hop records is different to someone who's doing pop-punk records or pop records or rock records or metal records. And I really love that we get a diversity of musical styles in the members-only section. Like every time there's hip-hop tracks and rock tracks and electronic tracks and pop tracks and a country track, and people from all genres stay and listen to the work of others, because the stuff that we're talking about, even though there's specific things for each genre, like how you're gonna treat a rock snare compared to a hip hop snare and a rock kick compared to a hip hop kick are different. Knowing how they're different, so knowing which advice to take and which advice not to take is big. And also seeing the things that work kind of across genres, and knowing how to get further away from things you don't want to sound like and how to get further towards things you do like the sound of, it really takes an interest in a lot of different styles of music. If you're producing or engineering, it's awesome to broaden your horizons in those ways. Andre Erlmeyer says the song is 2 minutes and 46 seconds long. It's amazing how much happens in 2 minutes and 46 seconds. There's amazing 2-minute songs out there, but 2-minute songs don't necessarily lack in complexity. This is not complex in the way that Bach or Beethoven or Mozart is complex, but it has its own type of complexity. Ant Rave says this based on my submission. This is brutal. Ant Rave, you were one of 3 people this month to bring up this song, and I was so inspired by it. You're the third one that I wanted to tackle this song in public to see if people like this format. And I'm also planning to bring up a couple of other tracks brought up by members. Recently, I think it was a Stripadelic who's in our members only section, who's bringing up some Audio Slave tracks. Man, you can learn a lot about rock production in those. It'd be cool to do a public stream where we look there. Ant Rave says, "Oh man, I'm still getting roasted." You're not getting roasted. I did mention one time that your intro didn't have as many things happening as this, but you're still doing good stuff, and keep on doing it. The reason that we listen to this stuff is to get better. And if we can't hear a gap between what we're doing and what our favorite records do, we're not going to improve. If we can't face that gap, facing that gap is the hardest thing to do, but it is a thing that will drive you forward the most. It doesn't mean you have to emulate records and exactly copy them, but it means that there's lessons embedded in them for you. And ultimately, you should be seeking to make music that emotionally connects with total strangers, where they have no choice but to keep listening because they feel like you understand them. That's what good music and good songwriting does. And one of the ways to understand your listeners is to know what keeps their attention. There's a lot of other ways to show your listeners you understand them, and that's a big part of music marketing, which is a topic that we can sometimes look in this channel. But I think that's enough yakking about this song for me. I was thinking I would keep this one down to 15 minutes, which is why it's only 37 minutes long. Usually I try to keep them to like 30 minutes or they go for an hour. But I think this has been enough for this. If you found this useful, definitely become a member. Super helpful. But I'd also encourage you to take one of the great full-length courses. These will do more than anything to change the way that you mix forever for the better. Mixing Breakthroughs, check it out, mixingbreakthroughs.com. If you don't know where to start with that one. If you're super confused about compression or EQ, how to get the most of it, check Compression Breakthroughs out or EQ Breakthroughs out. If you're really interested in mastering, check out Mastering Demystified. If you don't know where to start, just do Mixing Breakthroughs. All of them are guaranteed 30 days or your money back. It will change the way you work forever for the better, guaranteed. And I've just heard so many transformations from before and after in these courses. Invest in yourself. Do that. Big shout out and thanks also to Sound Toys for being a regular sponsor of the podcast. Love these guys making some of my favorite creative mixing effects in the known universe. Try out anything they make for free for 30 days over at soundtoys.com. Big thanks to you guys for hanging out with me. This has been Justin Colletti of SonicScoop on the SonicScoop podcast. See you next time.